This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injuries and additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals participating in the show. All persons described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions along with adult language, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
On August 20th, 2004, the 12-year-old Boy Scout was on a camping trip with his troop and his father in Uinta? Uinta, Wasatch National Forest. He and his father went off to go fishing at a nearby lake. At some point, he got wet and decided to head back to camp to change. And that was the last anyone ever saw of him. What happened? You're listening to the Mysterious Brews podcast, and tonight we bring you the case of Garrett Bardsley.
Welcome to a deep, dark, dank, yellow basement somewhere in the bowels of Georgia.
That's probably my best opening ever, man. They don't call me one take coach for nothing.
Them Native American words are kicking your ass,
dude. But I don't know exactly what the pollen index rating is. I don't know if it's like particles per whatever. I don't know. All I know is that our previous record was 9,000, and then a couple days ago it was 14,000.
Yeah, they shattered the record. They said
our cars were yellow.
Hell, my whole driveway's yellow. We went to see my son in Kentucky, and we got back, and the dog was not gray anymore. And if you put yellow pollen on a gray dog, he turns green.
Like my fiance's car is red, my car is white, and you couldn't tell the difference. They were both so yellow.
Shout out to the heater. Was able to hook up with him when we were in Kentucky having dinner, and shout out to his two youngins. They were hilarious, especially that younger one. The oldest one now, he's pretty sharp. We're gonna have him on the podcast. He's a ghost aficionado. He was like, y'all know anything about Lake Lanier? And I was like, yeah, I know enough that I ain't never going back.
Know enough that I ain't going to that damn place. I'll tell you that much right now. I've been there. I've been in it without knowing all the mysteries.
Yeah, I have too.
But now that I know I ain't going fucking back.
I got a buddy of mine. I don't think he listens. Just in case he does, shout out to Joel. He'll be turning 50 in a couple of days. He lives in Cumming, Georgia, and he keeps like, man, I'm part of some marina or something up there, and I can get a boat and we can go fishing. I was like, you can go fishing by yourself. I'll get some binoculars at the beach and watch you.
I ain't taking no damn chances.
That's what I told him. I said, I can give you many examples of people in boats with life jackets that drowned. How did that happen? Did I mess that up? I did mess that up. Oh, well. All right. No, we do have. All right. So Spotify's been great since we made the merger. Okay. They are. However, they hide their freaking analytics. Supposedly, we have a Spotify review, and I can't get to it. Like, I've tried different things to get to it, and, like, I've tried my phone, I've tried a laptop, and I still cannot access it. So if you leave us a review on Spotify, if you don't mind, could you head on over to the Apple Podcast and leave us one there? We can get to them.
Yeah, we haven't had one since January 29th. We're getting pretty lonely over here.
All right, let's see. I'm going to try one more time. I'm using a different browser. There is no... Oh, News Nugget. My wife listens to Spotify at work. She streams music and stuff. And we were the featured podcast. She took a screenshot.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
get you some of that. Get you some of that.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yep, it's not here, sons of bitches. Anyway, I don't. If you know how to get to the damn reviews for Spotify, let me know. Cause I sure as shit can't find it. Oh, we're big in India again.
Those Indians love us, man. We're just spicy enough for them.
And I know this is going to come as a shocker, but Billie Jean Phillips is still our number one episode.
It's very surprising. Wait, is that the one?
Yeah.
Oh, that's the one.
That's the one. That's the one.
That's the one that got me cussed out big time. And I have changed my ways since then.
He sure has.
I was giving her a compliment, though, to be honest with you.
I thought it was a compliment but anyway.
It's definitely the day we realized that, yeah, we are 100% talking about real people who have relatives that might seek out podcasts about their said relatives and listen and get quite fucking offended, to say the least.
Yes.
That was a long email.
That was episode 16 and Yuba County 5's top 8.
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy. Crazy talk.
It's still one of the most mysterious things we've ever covered.
Yeah, it is.
Like, why? Why did they do what they did? If you haven't listened, go. It's not very good quality because it's our first episode, but it's still worth a listen. You know, I was thinking about the other day is Arnold and Ruby. You remember that case? When they got...
Yeah, we still get likes on that one because I don't think a lot of people covered it other than Unsolved Mysteries.
That's so weird. How, if you haven't listened to that episode, 2 kids get in a car wreck. They wreck in a frozen ditch in North Dakota, and they can't find them. And then later on, they find the girl horribly decomposed, but the boy looked like he was brand new. You know, he looked... Because remember, I looked at the autopsy photo, and he just looked like he'd just died. That's a wild case, man. Go back and listen to all of them. All of our past episodes. They're worth a listen. I used to be very good at this. I used to be hilarious.
Super fan Ed, postal worker Ed, has made the trip back through them, I think, 3 times.
Damn.
He's a super fan. Super fan. All right, let's do this.
I was listening to an old episode, Judy Smith, woman that disappeared in Philadelphia, ended up in Asheville, murdered. I was listening to it on the way to Alabama, and we were pretty good, man. I don't know how good we are now, but we used to be pretty good.
And we used to drink a lot, too.
That's true. I don't do that anymore. I got me a nice Coke Zero next to me.
I got a big thing of water.
It is 3:00 on a Thursday.
Yeah. But anyway, so if you missed the beers of the week, let us know. We can always lie to you.
Yeah, we did lie a bunch, didn't we?
Well, there was a lot of beers.
Like, oh, we're drinking so-and-so from this brewery in Oklahoma, and it was damn PBR.
Yeah, was it you that sent was it PBR on tap?
What now?
Did you send the me where, is it Wisconsin you can get PBR on tap?
Yes, it's from a freaking drink fountain.
Yeah, it had Busch lattes next to it.
Busch Light and freaking Busch Light and PBR from a soda fountain. That's amazing.
I'd like to try that out. I know a young man in Arkansas that we may have piqued his interest on a drink fountain because he loves his Busch Lattes. Before we get started, let's just, I wanted to say we are thinking about all of y'all out west, Arkansas, Missouri, those lines of storms, even western Kentucky. Talked to the Heartlines. He was traveling through it, trying to get home. They got lucky again, and everything went south of them. So if you're in Arkansas, I know that about a year ago there was a bad outbreak, so y'all just buckle down and stay safe. I think Chuck Ball left the state to go mountain biking right before the storms hit, so hopefully his house is in good condition. But let's do this thing, man. Let's talk about Garrett Alexander Bardsley. He was born on July 24th, 1992, to his mother and father, Heidi and Kevin Bardsley. Garrett had two older brothers, Jared and Cameron, as well as an older sister, Courtney. He lived with his family in Elk Ridge, Utah. And you may be wondering, where's Elk Ridge located? Well, it's approximately 50 miles south of Salt Lake City. Now, Garrett's father, Kevin, worked as a general contractor and helped with the local Boy Scouts troop, where his children were active participants. The whole family were members of the Latter-day Saints Church. Now, Kevin and his three sons were planning to go on a camping trip, along with more than 12 other Boy Scouts and their fathers. Garrett was not an experienced outdoorsman by any stretch because, hell, he's 12. But he did have his wilderness survival skills badge. Now, Kevin described Garrett as innocent and still a little naive to some of the dangers that the wilderness possessed. Garrett had an encounter with a bear on one of his previous camping trips with the Boy Scouts. Now, this incident made Garrett respect the outdoors even more. On Thursday, August 19th, 2004, Kevin, Jared, Cameron, and Garrett packed up their camping gear into the old family vehicle, met up with the rest of the troop, and that group consisted of mostly teenage boys and their fathers. Now, their scoutmaster and leader, Wally Trotter, brought his son along as well and helped the group get ready to head off to the campsite. Wally, despite being the scoutmaster, was not going on this trip due to not being able to get off at work. Freaking work. Screwing up everything.
It ruins everything. Fuck.
God, I hate adulting. So, one of the reasons I think that he didn't push too hard to get off is the fact that this was not an official Boy Scouts troop camping activity where the kids could earn badges. This was going to be a last camping trip before all the kids went back to school. So they wanted to just have fun, enjoy themselves without any of the kids having to worry about earning merit badges or anything like that. Just be kids. And in total, there were 18 Boy Scouts, including Garrett, and the ages of those Boy Scouts were anywhere from 12, Garrett, to 18. Now, this meant that Garrett would be the youngest, and he also would be joined by 8 other fathers in the group who were going to supervise. Their destination was Cuberant Lake. Now, Cuberant Lake is high in the Uinta Mountains, and the Uinta Range is an east-west mountain range in northeast Utah. It's roughly 50 miles east of Salt Lake City. And yes, the same Uinta mountain range basin that Skinwalker Ranch is located near.
That might come in to play later because this freaking case is crazy.
Yeah, it is. And that whole
I can't believe I never heard of it.
I hadn't either.
I never heard of it, and I was like,
I think this was a listener request, but they had sent a link. I'll send you the link when we're done. But whatever website they found it on has a plethora of weird cases.
Well, this has got to be a 411 for sure.
Oh yeah, well it is. I sent you that thing last night, and he jumped right into it. David Pilatus did. So, but anyway, we'll get to all that, man. We'll get to all that.
Everybody just calm down.
Calm your tits. So, again, we're talking about the Uintas. That whole basin's weird. You know, it's skinwalkers, Skinwalker Ranch, cattle mutilations, you name it, UFOs, it all happens up there. So the Cuberant Lakes Trail is roughly 6.6 miles round trip. So from the parking lot to the lake, back to the parking lot, 6.6 miles. And there's about 1,000-foot elevation change throughout the trail. Now, Salt Lake City, I think, sits at around 5,000 or 6,000 feet. And I have heard, I've not ever experienced it because I don't hike, but if you're into that kind of stuff, you need to acclimate yourself to the elevation change for at least a day or two before you do anything strenuous. I do know out in Denver, they sell bottled air for for your headaches. Now
they did that in Spaceballs too. If you've ever seen that movie,
it's a classic, man. It's a classic.
It's a great movie.
So
if you've never seen it, check it out.
That 1,000-foot elevation change happens throughout the trail, and it takes you up over one of the shoulders of the Uinta Mountains called Mount Marshall. Now, after you go around that little shoulder, it drops down into a basin where Cuberant Lake sits. Now, there are several other unnamed lakes that dot the area. And by unnamed, they just number them. So you've got a very unique area in that basin with the lakes and the trail, and it can be quite dangerous. More than half the area is surrounded by steep mountain ridges going up, and the other half is steep drop-offs. Now, the Cuberant Lakes Trail is the only maintained route in and out of the basin, while the 6.6 miles out and back is not a significant distance for hikers. The difficulty of the trail is much more than other trails due to that elevation.
That'd be a significant amount for me. I promise you that much.
Yeah. Well, if you're not acclimated to high elevation, the first 100 yards at 10,000 feet can knock you to your knees.
Yeah, my fat ass would be dying.
My old ass would be dying. Now, with the entire trail being at 10,000 feet, the hike is strenuous to say the least. And this hike for the group of Boy Scouts would be pretty tough, even though they were coming from Elk Ridge, which is outside of Salt Lake, which is around 5,000 feet. Now, Garrett would have had an easier time on the hike than a person who lived at sea level would have because he was at least acclimated to 5,000 feet. Now, from reports, the group had at least one mule, possibly more, helping carry their gear up the trail. Now, this would significantly lessen the burden of packing in everything. So the hike to the basin was rather uneventful, and everyone made it in reasonably good condition. The total hike more than likely took a few hours, and the scout troop set up camp just off the main trail about a third of a mile from Cuberant Lake. The campsite is a flat area lacking trees, but is also next to a small pond and a patch of boggy grass, which they say boggy grass all the time, and I'm envisioning like cattails.
Yeah, that's what I would picture too, but I don't think that's what they're meaning.
No, I don't either. So this spot is one of the few places that would be big enough to hold a large group of campers. Almost the entire terrain of this location consists of either a thick forest or steep slopes of rock and boulders, granite boulders. Keep that in mind too. Now, this is probably the reason they didn't go all the way to Cuberant Lake, because the site gave them quick and easy access to some of the other unnamed lakes within the basin, and they were not that far from Cuberant. Camp was made just outside the tree line, and as the sun started to set, everyone was in good spirits. That night, they all went to bed, and everything seemed great. So on Friday morning, the group's first full day in the Uintas, Kevin wakes Garrett up fairly early because he wanted to take Garrett fishing on one of those unnamed lakes that was close to the campsite. Now, the small lake had plenty of fish in it, and Kevin thought it would be easier to fish there than hike all the way to Cuberant Lake and fish. So the dull gray morning light peeked over the mountain ridges, and Kevin explained to Garrett that this was the perfect time to get a bite. So they grabbed their fishing poles and walked off into the cool, damp morning. Their path took them through a small, boggy area and then through a bit of forest with the unnamed lake just on the other side. Now, the lake is almost 300 yards from the camp at the closest point. Now, before they could even get their lines wet, Garrett either isn't paying attention and steps into some water, or he gets too close to the edge of the lake and he steps off into the edge of it. Either way, he's got wet shoes and socks. And in no time, Garrett starts telling his dad, hey, my feet are getting cold. Can I go back to camp, change? I've got a spare pair of shoes and some extra socks. Kevin didn't want to be handing out a whole lot of tough love because this was supposed to be a relaxing trip, and he wanted to make sure Garrett wasn't suffering, so he said sure. And he asked Garrett if he knew how to get back to the campsite. Garrett assured him that he did. Kevin tells Garrett to head back to the camp, get changed, and come right back. So as Garrett begins heading back towards the camp, he carelessly begins going in the wrong direction. Fortunately, Kevin was watching and noticed this, calls out to Garrett and says, hey, you're going the wrong way. You need to go this way. So Garrett corrects his path, heads back towards camp, and Kevin sees him disappear into the thick trees and foliage. Now, this was approximately 8 a.m. on that Friday morning.
And it's only like 150 yards from camp, right?
It's less than, yeah, we'll get into the distances. They're saying that from like the campsite itself to the actual lake's 300 yards, but yeah, it's been said that it's less than 125 yards. I got it written down. But
basically, if there's not a whole lot of switchbacks and whatnot, he should still be able to see him the whole way, right? I would assume so.
Well, the way it was explained was you could see he was kind of elevated watching him, and then he hits the tree line, and then he kind of disappears just out of sight. But just out of sight of the tree line is basically the campsite. So when he disappears, Kevin's thinking, well, when he disappears into the tree line, Kevin's thinking, all right, he's back at camp, about 15, 20 minutes, he'll be good. So 15, 20 minutes ticks by, and Kevin's like, all right, where the hell is he? And so he decides to go check on Garrett. So he hikes back to camp. When he gets there, he finds the rest of the camping group starting to wake up, and nobody's seen Garrett. Somehow, Garrett never made it back to camp. Even though he had only been missing for 20 minutes, at the most 30, Kevin states that he is immediately washed over with a sense of panic. And everyone agreed that Garrett could not have gotten very far in that time frame. So one of Garrett's friends, Alex Trotter, stated that he wasn't worried at first because he's like, man, he's only been gone 20 minutes. He thought that as soon as everybody starts hollering Garrett's name, Garrett would hear them, turn around, or figure out where they're at, and he'd come walking up embarrassed. But that quickly changes for Alex. Alex starts seeing the adults' faces turn to fear. And that brought him back to the reality that something was going on. So some scouts teamed up with other adults to search the immediate area, confident, again, Garrett would be found pretty quickly. He couldn't have gotten very far. Some other scouts were staying in camp, thinking that the situation wasn't as serious as it was. Gary Hansen tells these scouts. Now, I think I glossed over Gary Hansen. Let me go back. Gary Hansen is basically in charge of the group when Wally can't go. He's I think he's like second in charge anyway. So anyway, he's kind of like the acting scoutmaster. Yeah. I got it right. Look at me being smart.
Look at you, bro.
I know it, man. So anyway, Gary tells the scouts in camp, hey, get dressed and y'all help look for Garrett. Because if we can't find him, it gets pretty cold up here and things are going to go sideways fairly quickly. So eventually it was determined that everyone needed to search for Garrett. And within about another 30 minutes, the adults realized that they need search and rescue. So Gary Hansen volunteers to hike back down the trail to where they had parked so he could drive to the nearest location to get cell service. So to make this trip quicker, he took a mule and reached the parking lot within an hour. He then has to drive 5.1 miles to Lost Lake before he finds cell service. Oddly enough, the true scoutmaster, Wally Trotter, was sitting in his office in the city, and he all of a sudden gets a feeling that something's wrong. He can't explain why he got the feeling. He can't explain what it was. He just has this gut feeling something's wrong. So he then has the thought pop in his head, I need to call Gary. Now, he knew this was going to be a long shot due to the campsite not having cell service, but he felt compelled to call anyways. He tries to brush it off, but he says this feeling just starts getting stronger and stronger. So as he goes to pick up his phone to call Gary, Gary actually calls him. And he tells Wally, hey, Garrett is missing, and I've called in search and rescue. So Wally leaves work immediately, drives to the Uintas to help search for Garrett.
So how long was it before they called in search and rescue? It does seem pretty quick.
I would say, just trying to piece it together, it takes Gary an hour to go back to the parking lot. Probably, say, 10, 15 minutes to get cell service. So you're looking at an hour and 15 minutes. He's probably been gone by the end, I'd say less than 3 hours.
Well, okay, maybe it's not so soon.
It may be less, though. I mean, I'm just trying to say, I don't know how long they searched. I know he was gone for 15, 20 minutes when Kevin decided to goes back, probably takes him, 5 minutes to walk back to camp.
Right.
So if he's gone, we're looking at, he's been missing for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, puts his dad back in camp. They get everybody riled up, or not riled up, but get everybody together, get them looking. I would say that within an hour of them not finding him, they're like, nope, call in search and rescue. But then you got to add that other hour of travel into it. So yeah, I'd say between 2 and 3 hours.
Gotcha.
So we shit on them all the time, and I always say we give props where it's due. I want to officially, and I will say this probably numerous times, but Summit County Sheriff's Office on Mount Rushmore of what the hell you're supposed to do when it comes to missing children and doing what authorities need to do. They were officially notified of his disappearance at 10:52 a.m. A deputy immediately was dispatched to meet with Gary at Lost Lake. Now, the call had come into them by way of a Forest Service worker who was just by luck working in a field and sees Gary frantically trying to use his phone, goes down there, figures out what's going on. So initially the deputy was working off some very limited information, but once he got to Gary at Lost Lake, he gets the full story. So the deputy and Gary drive back up to the trailhead, hoping that by the time they get to the campsite that this is all for nothing and Garrett's been found. But when they get to the campsite, they realize real quick this was an emergency. So the deputy immediately establishes a command center at Pass Lake right off the highway, and the initial focus for search and rescue is containment, which I thought was pretty smart on their part. So instead of going to the campsite and spreading out from there, they basically started down there and tried to work around and contain him and then work back towards the campsite, hoping that they would run into him.
I mean, that's a solid plan, and you think it would work.
Yeah. But there's a big but. So
that's a big butt right there, boy.
That's a huge bit. So,
big bitch right there.
So the deputy placed his search and rescue personnel on all the trails and trailheads in the vicinity just in case Garrett somehow managed to find his way to another trail. 2 main search and rescue groups were created, with one heading immediately to Q-Burnt Lake to help the scout leaders with their search, while the other was sent to do a search along the Weber River. Now, Weber River and Weber Canyon are to the south of Kubert Lake, and the river runs to the southeast toward a road. And the thought was that if Garrett somehow made his way out of the basin, he could easily hit that river, which would act as a natural barrier, hopefully forcing him to follow it downward. Now, if Garrett could find the river and decide to follow it either up or down would lead him to the road and safety, up would lead him further into the mountains and the wilderness. So this secondary group was sent to search along that river and the canyon to make sure that Garrett was not following the water. Soon, a group of searchers on horseback arrive, and they are given the task of making the lake loop, which is a 4.5-mile ride. The thinking there was that there was a possibility that Garrett got to Kubert Lake's trail, followed it down, and then made a wrong turn. Remember, this trail is the only well-maintained route into and out of the basin, even though it's fairly rough tracking. Now, if the horseback team completed their route, or not if, when the horseback team completed their loop and found nothing, they reported back to Kubert Lake Basin to help search that area. So with all that said, everybody's searching and they don't turn up any evidence of Garrett. So as the sun starts to set on Friday evening, helicopters and planes began to search the air above Weber Canyon, Kubert Lake Basin using FLIR. And if you don't know anything about that, that is forward-looking infrared. Which basically will give off, picks up a heat signature. Now, the group of adults at the campsite starts lighting bonfires around the shores of some of these nameless lakes and tries to maintain these fires in the night, hoping that Garrett could see the light of the fire and make his way towards one. On Saturday, August 21st, the search increased significantly with hundreds of professional and volunteer searchers joining to help find Garrett. The scouts who were still in camp, which included both of Garrett's brothers, hiked back off the mountain and began heading home. Whatever the trip was supposed to be before Garrett disappeared was now certainly over. Search dogs, horses, helicopters, and planes searched the area with a sense of urgency. And it begins to rain on Saturday. And everyone's mood shifts, and it's not into a good shift.
No, definitely not. This is why these cases are so crazy, is the fact that there are tons of people looking for this kid, and they just find nothing.
Nada. It's mind-boggling, man.
It's one of the many, 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 many reasons why I don't go camping. You can't get me out there. I do not want any part of it. None.
I don't either.
The more that we research these cases, the more that I know that I'm making the right life choice by staying the hell out of these forests, because there's something mysterious going on.
Yeah, everybody's like, man, when you retire, you and your wife should go see some of the national parks. And I'm like, do y'all know what happens in those?
I mean...
If anything, this podcast has given me an uncanny sense of, hell no, I ain't.
I can certainly tell you I'm not staying overnight.
Nope.
I will go. If I've been to, I've been to Yellowstone. I'd like to go to Yosemite. I'd like to see these places, but I'm not staying overnight.
If I can't drive most of the way, I ain't going.
Yeah, I was about to say, and I'm not getting off the main roads. I'll drive through them, but I'm not hiking. I'm not camping. There's no way. All the shit that we've covered. Yeah. No.
So while no one was saying it, everyone knew that if Garrett got wet and had to spend the night in the mountains, he could easily perish. Search and Rescue refused to stop searching, even going as far as to maintain the FLIR searches and employ massive spotlights in an attempt to get Garrett's attention. They also called his name over loudspeakers and continued their helicopter and plane searches as the weather permitted. What the hell? Okay, so Kevin unfortunately has to make the call and let his wife know that their youngest son is missing. And Heidi says that she recalls getting that phone call and having this sick feeling in the base of her stomach. And immediately she had this sense, for whatever reason, Garrett would never be found. And that,
that's just awful.
Yes, I cannot imagine.
I don't even have kids, and I still feel for these people. Like, oh,
yeah, it's bad. So
when we see shit like, you know, parents whose kids go missing, and then they end up making like a foundation to help others, and like they do all these things. Like, these people are so much stronger than I think I would be. Like, I don't even know if I could carry on.
That's my biggest thing.
Much less establish a center for people to, you know, resources to help other missing children. It's just that, I don't know. Hats off to people like that.
Yeah, I agree.
That's all I'm trying to say is I couldn't do it.
Yeah, look at Morgan Nick's mom. She never went back home. She just stayed right there and basically lived out of the fire station and the library. Yeah, anyway, Sunday, August 2nd, morale's low. And there's still this lingering hope, though, that Garrett may have survived the night. And unfortunately, those hopes start to fade because the weather turns again and it begins to snow. And to make matters even worse, the weekend's coming to an end, which means that many of those search and rescue volunteers have to go back to their day jobs.
Well, what would give me a little bit of hope is the fact that he was a Boy Scout.
Yes.
You know, he probably had way more survival skills than just a normal kid. Whether or not he knew how to build a fire or could do it successfully, I would have a little hope that he would survive the night just simply because of the skills he learned through the Scouts.
Yeah, you would hope, man, because he had just gotten that wilderness badge, so surely some of that stuff was fresh on his mind. Anyway, Monday passes into Tuesday, and the search has now become a recovery operation due to the bad weather that had plagued the mountain. There seemed to be no possibility that Garrett could have survived those days, but there was a brief glimmer of hope that occurred that Tuesday evening. A lone sock was found in the woods by one of the searchers, and it was reported that it matched those that Garrett had in his camping gear. The sock was roughly 3/4 of a mile from where Garrett was last seen. Now, Sheriff Dave Unman, good God. Sheriff Dave Edmond, Sheriff Dave, I apologize. Sheriff Dave Edmond stated that if it was Garrett's, then he had followed a predictable path of travel downhill and towards the highest peak in the immediate area. The terrain the sock was found in was a steep ravine marked by an outcropping of boulders. Granite boulders, like a boulder field. And it was dotted with small caves. So if you're keeping track of the missing 411 checklist, we've ticked off about 4 or 5 of them. So the area where the sock was found kind of made sense because it was an area that someone might try and seek shelter in some of those caves. So searchers focused in on that boulder field for quite some time, hoping that they would find additional clues and began searching the caves. The sock, however, was determined to have not belonged to Garrett when DNA testing was done on it. On Wednesday, Sheriff Edmonds said that they had already found a lot of clothing items during the search, but so far none of it was identified as Garrett's. So the search had reached a staggering, this is what blows my mind. So by Wednesday, so he goes missing on Friday. So 5 days later, they have searched 36 square miles from the point which he disappeared.
And the thing is, if he was there, they would have found him.
Yeah.
That proves to me that he's just not there. But how's this possible? Where could he have possibly gone?
Good God.
What?
My son. Anyway.
What'd he do?
He texts me. I'll tell you later, but he's a genius. Anyway,
Share with the group. We all want to know. We want to know what the fruit of your looms is up to.
He should be asleep, but he's not for some reason. He's just now starting to go to bed, and he's got to get back up at 9.
And yes, people, I know it's supposed to be fruit of your loins, but I thought looms was funnier.
Yes, it was. Oh, me. So we've got the sheriff stating that there was nothing suspicious about the disappearance, and he and the rest of the authorities still believed 100% that Garrett was somewhere in those woods or in the wilderness. So over the years, Summit County had conducted many, many searches in those same mountains. Some of them ended in success. Some of them didn't. Sometimes the lost individual was found. Sometimes they were never found. A sheriff's officer, Captain Joe Offred, described the circumstances in which people had been found in the past. He said that many of the victims lost in the area seek shelter under logs or rocks, and their bodies would often be found in these types of areas. Sometimes they would be wearing no clothes due to paradoxical undressing from experiencing hypothermia. Even in August and during the search for Garrett, nightly temperatures dipped below freezing. So as news of Garrett's disappearance spread, more and more people donated their time to try and help. By the time the next weekend rolled around, the number of volunteers exceeded 1,000. And despite having numbers and manpower on their side, that weekend would end the same as the last, with no sign of Garrett. The Summit County Sheriff's Office officially called off the search at the end of the day on Saturday, August 29th. There was no great explanation as to why such a thorough and intense search had failed. Sheriff Edmonds could only speculate, saying that Garrett could be under a ledge, lodged in a crevice, or hidden in a cave. Alternatively, he may have been the victim of predation and was dragged off by a bear or mountain lion. However, there was nothing found to indicate that.
You would think you would find blood, you'd find torn clothing, you would hear screaming.
Yeah.
No one's getting silently taken by a bear.
No.
I'm going to cry like a bitch.
Yeah. You gonna know? I'm screaming
I'd be screaming for daddy.
Like a 12-year-old girl, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. I scream like a 12-year-old girl anyway, especially if you startle me. It's awful. It's my shame I must live with. I have no manly scream when it comes to being like startled. I scream like a child.
That's awesome. So while there would no longer be any dedicated search teams from the sheriff's office involved in any daily searches, they did state that they would dedicate one day a week to continue the search. Other organizations who were involved in the search also started to scale back and eventually stop their services. Kevin, Garrett's dad, searched for Garrett relentlessly through the treacherous mountain terrain until late into the night before being forced to sleep by total exhaustion. He would spend small periods of time sleeping in his car, waking up cold at night, knowing that if he was cold, Garrett's conditions must be far worse. Even though the sheriff's office was conducting its own search for Garrett, Kevin, along with family, friends, and volunteers, had set up their own large search party. Together, they covered many locations. Most of them were places already searched by the sheriff. The goal was simply to be as thorough as possible. And this is another great moment for the Summit County Sheriff's Office, because Sheriff Edmonds didn't get pissed off. He actually welcomed the family volunteer group as a way to thoroughly cover those areas, not once, but twice. And they regularly shared information and coverage data. So both Kevin and Heidi dealt with the stress of the search differently. Every day Kevin woke up, he believed it would be the day he would find Garrett. Like I said earlier, for Heidi, the opposite was true. Remember, from the beginning, she had a feeling that this search was not going to turn up anything. The family would go on to start the Garrett Bardsley Foundation, and their Facebook page states that the nonprofit is dedicated to using experience and resources to help search and rescue situations for those in need in wilderness terrain.
See, that's what I'm saying. I didn't even know that they had done that when I mentioned it earlier. But yeah, good on them. I mean, that's amazing.
Well, I think it gives you something to get up to,
Gives you a reason to keep going.
Yeah.
That's a good point. But
Kevin wanted to use as many of the lessons and knowledge that he had gained during this search for his son and hoped that he could save another family from suffering the same fate. In fact, less than a year after Garrett's disappearance, another Boy Scout disappeared in the Uintas. His name was Brennan Hawkins. The Summit County Sheriff actually called Kevin and asked if he wanted to come up and join in the search. Kevin didn't hesitate, headed right off. He dropped everything and helped search the area, and after 4 days, 11-year-old Brennan Hawkins was found at Lily Lake, still alive. Now, the incident actually gives some insight into what some kids are thinking when they get lost in the wilderness. Brennan defied all conventional thinking and went uphill instead of down. He was always told to do 2 things. 1, don't talk to strangers, and 2, stay on the trail. He did both, but not in a way that was helpful. Brennan followed the trail, and several times he stated after he was found that a searcher would come near him on horseback or ATV, but he would run off the trail and hide and wait for them to pass because he was afraid that a stranger might abduct him.
Oh, wow.
So that just goes to show you kids are listening, and sometimes they listen too well. He was eventually discovered by a man searching on foot. 1 year later, in August of 2005, the Bardsley family organized a new and final search in the area where Garrett vanished. They spent a lot of time putting the word out in order to get a rush of volunteers with hopes of putting the mystery to rest. The multi-day search saw over 500 volunteers show up. During that time, they discovered many items of initial interest, such as bones, clothes, and other gear, but in the end, none of it was determined to belong to Garrett. The bones were actually animal bones.
The sock itself, did they ever determine the sock that they found was Garrett's?
No, they did DNA testing on it and found that it was not a match.
Right, because didn't one of the rescuers claim they had actually lost a sock because they got wet?
Yes.
While searching.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the sock that they found was not his. So, literally no evidence of this child has ever been found. None. That's crazy.
It is. Again, it's why these cases are so wild. Now, Kevin and Heidi Bardsley expressed their sincerest thanks to all the volunteers as well as their intent to make this the last official search. The family and countless volunteers had put so many hours into the search, and somehow they didn't have anything to show for it. Kevin tells reporters that this was the last big search. And as far as full investigation conducted by the Summit County Sheriff, we only know a limited amount of information due to Garrett's case still being an open investigation. Another hats off to Summit County. They're not treating it as a closed case. While the sheriff has never suggested that foul play could be involved in the case, they can't outright disregard that possibility. Now, there are a few things that we know that occurred in the years after Garrett disappeared. Most of these things amounted to nothing of importance. However, there are things that we have bits and pieces of information about, such as on October 3rd, 2006, an agent from Utah's Adult Probation and Parole Department contacted the sheriff saying that he had been in the Uinta Lake area hunting grouse and he had found a tennis shoe. The shoe was well worn and appeared to have been sitting in the elements for quite a while due to its poor condition. A brand name was not readily identifiable, and the agent contacted the sheriff because he believed the shoe might belong to Garrett Bardsley. After authorities retrieved the shoe, they found that its appearance and tread were similar to what Garrett was known to be wearing, which was a pair of white Converse with blue and black stars on them. But the shoe measured 10.5 inches, and Garrett wore a size 6 or 7. So basically, another dead end. On May 31st, 2016, 2 members of the sheriff's office went to the Promontory Correctional Facility in Utah to perform an interview. The facility is located within a larger prison and primarily houses inmates involved in 2 programs, substance abuse treatment and sex offender treatment. It is not public record who they spoke to and why. Now, you can make all the inferences you want about this meeting, but in the end, we simply don't know the reasons surrounding it. The inmate was read his Miranda rights and did speak with the sheriff, but that is all that has been made public. Again, kudos to the Summit County Sheriff's Office for chasing all of these leads down. These types of interviews do pop up every once in a while in missing person cases, and they are usually due to some long shot lead, rumor, or the gossip mill that they come across in separate investigations. In June of 2016, a member of the sheriff's office went to meet another unknown individual and told this unknown individual that they just wanted to talk about Garrett Bardsley. They confirmed that this individual was at Lost Lake with one or more people on August 19th and 20th in 2004, the time frame that Garrett disappeared. They were asked if they ever encountered a juvenile while they were there, and they said they had not. Now, this individual said that they were with at least one other person the entire time and left around 10 a.m. on the 20th. They never socialized with any strangers in the vicinity. Again, it's hard to know what prompted the interview, especially considering this person was at Lost Lake on the actual days that he disappeared. But remember, Lost Lake is over 5 miles from Cubrant Lake Cubrant Lake Trailhead. So this person was well away from Garrett's vicinity at the time he disappeared. Now, on May 30th, 2019, the sheriff's office received an anonymous tip regarding the Garrett Bardsley case. While there's no public details about what this tip was, Summit County Sheriff's Office did investigate the lead, according to them. Again, chasing all the leads. Hats off to the sheriff's office for continuing to do so. Now, there does not appear to be any updates, even minor ones, since 2019, and as of today, the case is still active, but it is as if Garrett simply walked into the woods and vanished without a trace. So let's look at some of the details right before Garrett disappeared, specifically where Garrett and Kevin were exactly. Now, some sources make it sound like they were at the lake, possibly moving around it to a specific spot when Garrett fell into the boggy grass and got his shoes wet. If that is the case, we're looking at about a 300-yard walk back to camp. Now, other sources describe something completely different. One says that Garrett fell into a stream that feeds the unnamed lake. Now, the trail is confusing, and it is located next to a small stream that leads from where the scouts were camped and towards the lake. The trail seems to weave in and around the stream, and it is highly possible that Garrett could have tripped and got his shoes wet there. The biggest difference this makes is the distance. One source says that when Garrett got his shoes wet, he was about 120 paces from the camp. Now, if that is a technical distance, because that is a technical means of measurement, you can equate that to roughly 200 yards, which puts Garrett and Kevin in the woods between the camp and the lake. Now, if they're not using that pace as a distance marker, then you could interpret the 120 paces as them being even closer to the camp. Either way, some sources place Kevin and Garrett closer to the camp than others, and it's difficult to determine which one is true. The story that places them closer has a lot more detail, which would lead you to believe that is the actual distance. On the other hand, a map used by the sheriff's office while conducting the search placed the point last seen as the shore on the north side of the lake. That would put Kevin and Garrett more than 300 yards from camp. And I know this sounds like we're splitting hairs, but the longer the distance back to camp, the more likely it is in that area that Garrett could have gotten lost, took the wrong trail. So for the sake of an argument, let's just say that Garrett was at least 200 yards from camp and within that little wooded area. This definitely could be enough distance for someone to get lost. Another thing is the condition of the trail between the Cubrant Lakes Trail and the unnamed lake. Some sources describe it as a well-established path. Several people have stated that is not the case at all, with the path being confusing in parts and almost non-existent in others. You have to keep in mind that while the main trail is quote-unquote maintained, side trails are never maintained to these unnamed lakes, and we know from Kevin's story that Garrett wasn't sure of the correct path back to the camp, immediately heading off in the wrong direction, only to be corrected by his father. So to me, that says something about how clear the trail was that they were on from the trailhead to this unnamed lake. Now, I know that's my opinion, and opinions are like assholes. Everybody's got one. Sometimes they're stinky. However, in my opinion, it sounds like the trail to the unnamed lake from the campsite was a game trail and not a well-worn one at that. A child could definitely get lost if that was the case. The answer to how Garrett got lost in that area is best summed up by one of the searchers who looked for him, Ed Bonner. Now, Ed was very familiar with the area and related it to the times he brought a group of boys to go hiking in that location. He said, quote, "When I come, I make a couple of them go ahead and be out front. They ask me where do we go, and I make them think about what they're doing. Boys that age, they don't think, they just go," end quote. And that's true.
It is true, but you're going to find a trace of the kid. If he just go, there's going to be something. He's going to know he's in trouble at some point, and he's going to call for help. He's going to do something.
That's what my thing is. He's not, from all the things that I read, he's not a kid that just wanders around and doesn't ask for help.
He's a Boy Scout, for God's sakes. He just got his wilderness badge. He's going to know
immediately, if I don't recognize, I stand still.
That, or he's going to leave clues to where he's going, leave something behind. He's going to try to be found if he is capable of it.
Now, I could see Garrett walking the trail and the trail kind of being, sparse like a game trail, and he's trudging along and he gets to a spot where he has to make a choice in what direction to go. While it's possible that Garrett could get lost on his way back to camp, the biggest problem I have is, how did he get lost? We have now determined that it is inside 300 yards. More likely it is inside 200 yards. Everything I read was 150. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
That's still that's screaming distance for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But he didn't make a sound.
Not a peep.
However, I did read that the father on his way back heard a very faint call of Dad.
Oh, I didn't see that.
You didn't see that? And from what it said was, he literally ignored it because it was in the wrong direction of where he was going, or the direction his son was going.
Man.
See, that's unsubstantiated. I can't prove it. I don't know. That's just what I saw in my research. Was he heard a very faint Dad, not a cry for help, not necessarily. It didn't say like a weak call. You know what I'm saying? Like he's hurt, or like, you know, like Dad.
Yeah.
It was just far away. So he barely heard it.
God.
That's the only thing that I saw that's disagreeing with your research. Now, whether that's true or not, I can't say, but that's spooky as hell if it is.
Yeah, it is.
But it did say that I don't want to say literally ignored it, but he heard it.
Brushed it off
as nothing and kept going. I don't see how you do. That's why part of the reason why I don't really believe that's true is because how do you just brush that off?
Yeah.
If you're a father walking back to find your son who hasn't come back and you're worried about him, and you hear someone say Dad, and you don't automatically react to that. That's why I don't believe it to be necessarily true.
And you had to correct him to go the right way. So
right.
My biggest thing is, how in the hell did he get out of the Cuberant Lake Basin? If he left the basin, he would have had to travel down a very steep ridge. And you would hope that if he was faced with something like that, he would realize he had made a wrong turn. There were no steep slopes leading from the campsite to the unnamed lake. It is and was all flat terrain with that little boggy area and some woods. You would think that someone, even an 11, 12-year-old, would recognize that a steep slope was not there as we walked into the lake. But, like Ed Bonner pointed out, sometimes kids just don't think. Garrett's fishing pole is a rub in this investigation too, because it's never been found. How long would he have continued to carry it?
Right. And so if we're going to try to claim animal predation, you're going to get carried off by a bear, but you're going to keep your fishing rod on you?
Yeah, and it wouldn't have benefited him at all to continue to carry it, because if anyone who's ever fished around a pond that has tree limbs knows, fucking thing carrying around in the woods is a bitch because it snags on everything.
Yeah.
It has never been found. Now, he could have slipped and fallen along some steep slope leading out of the basin and ended up in a place where people just couldn't see him. In that scenario, you would think his fishing pole would be found. But, like I said, it's gone too. No FLIR hits also boggle my mind. This is definitely a missing 411 case. You have a disappearance within 15 minutes. Dad sees him walk into the tree line and poof, he's gone. You have proximity to water, boulder granite fields, bad weather almost immediately hindering the search efforts, 36 square mile search using tracking dogs, and ne'er a thing was found. Not even the tracking dogs couldn't even find his scent. So it's like he just blinked out of existence.
Yeah. I mean, we always try to keep things in the realm of natural things, but this is starting to sound very supernatural.
Yeah, now
because no scent, no evidence, the amount of space that he had to disappear. Like if it is 200 yards, let's call it 200 yards because you saw 300, I saw 150. Let's say 200 yards. It's just 200 yards. And they searched 36 square miles and not a single trace of this kid has been found. Not a scent, not a FLIR hit, nothing. No fishing pole, nothing. The kid blinked out of existence. He stepped into another realm.
Yep. And that's what I think happens in a lot of these cases, that there's a veil between dimensions. But anyway, now people who do not believe that missing 411 cases are legit point to the case of Greg Monroe in California. Greg was a 62-year-old man who went out on a solo hunting trip in the Mojave National Preserve back in 2013 and vanished without a trace. When the search started, they found his truck and his campsite, but Greg was nowhere to be found. They put the usual resources into the search, but no success. The only way they discovered what happened to Greg was by having a ground searcher almost suffer the same fate, and that was a 30-inch by 30-inch square well shaft some 40 feet deep that had been covered by deadfall and brush, and it was impossible to see when you were walking nearby. The searcher fell through and luckily caught himself as he began to fall. Greg was not so lucky and fell to his death. Naysayers point to this case as bad luck can happen at any time, and it was pure happenstance that Greg was found. They also state that sometimes what we cannot imagine happening actually happens, and that is the case and the cause of a lot of these disappearances.
I mean, that's possible, but
I just don't. Distance, it just checks way too many boxes of
convenience.
Yeah. And my thing is, that is a great point to make, that there are, wells out there that you just don't know about. There's holes, there's sinkholes and stuff like that people walking right by it will never see. But that's not the case. We're talking about mountainside trail. Okay? There's nothing. There's not been any signs of, like you said, predation. There's not been any signs of rock falls where someone could have tumbled down. No disturbed ground. There's nothing been found. I cannot even begin to imagine what Kevin and Heidi had to go through. The not knowing of what happened has to be the worst part, especially knowing Garrett had only needed to walk less than, let's say, 200 yards to get back to camp. Garrett Alexander Bardsley went missing on August 20th, 2004 at the age of 12. He was 5 feet tall and weighed 105 pounds. He had light brown hair, that was down to his shoulders. Garrett had hazel eyes, a gap between his two upper teeth, and a birthmark on his right forearm. The last time he was seen, he was wearing a black hooded Quicksilver pullover sweatshirt, size medium, reversible Nike sweatpants, one side red silky fabric with a black and white stripe, and the other black mesh with a red-white stripe. A white T-shirt with some writing on it, Nike ankle socks, and size 6 or 8 white Converse sneakers with either a black or navy colored star on the side. If you have any information about Garrett's disappearance, please contact the Summit County Sheriff's Department. But with all that said, I still go back to he just blinked out of existence in this reality.
Well, my question would be is how thoroughly did they check the water? Is it possible that he may have fell in the water and drowned and floated away? How deep is the water? How fast is the water? Was the water on the trail that he was walking? That would be my only logical explanation. And he just, for whatever reason, wasn't found. But you still think he'd be calling out. You fall in the water, wouldn't you call for help?
Yeah, and he was already wet and ill, so yeah, he could have just basically had a meltdown right there and started screaming. And that's what, I don't know, man. Just, there's no sound. There's literally nothing. And the other thing is the way that it reads, it could have been like, and this is not the case, but it could have gone something similar to Kevin watches him walk into the woods and immediately he's like, I'm going to go check on him. And he could have begun to walk and follow him and still Garrett's gone. He never makes it back to camp.
Right.
Something happened in that wood line.
But at the same time, if he fell in the water, the dogs would got a scent.
Right. Well, I mean, and that's the thing. They don't have a scent of him, I think, other than right there at the edge of the lake. That's it.
Where he went in the first time.
Right. Where he just stepped in and got his socks and shoes wet.
Right.
All right. Recommendations?
I want to recommend a documentary I've watched before, but I watched it again recently. If you haven't seen it, you really need to experience it. It's on Netflix, and it's Trainwreck, the story of Woodstock 99. That was just crazy.
Yeah, it was.
And here's the thing, is I wanted to go so badly. I was 17, and I begged my mom to let me go. And in her infinite wisdom, thank God for her, she didn't want her 17-year-old and his 17-year-old idiot friends driving to upstate New York to attend a 3-day concert. And thank God. I thank God for it. If you don't know about Woodstock 99, watch it because it is basically Lord of the Flies, man, by the end of it.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It
got Western.
To say it got wild would be a great understatement.
So I think I've recommended this before, so just deal with it. There is a new podcast from Ballin Studios. That's right, Mr. Ballin, and it is Late Nights with Nexpo. And Nexpo is actually a YouTube creator who has a well-established YouTube channel.
I like Nexpo.
And I think,
if I'm not mistaken, Nexpo is like where I found the Pemberton incident and the SOS incident. I believe it was from him is where I even discovered those.
Well, right now the podcast has 7 episodes. He covered the Solder children. He's covering Willowbrook right now, and Jesus, man, that's.
It was either Nexpro or Barely Sociables where I found those cases. Barely Sociable, they're pretty similar, and Barely Sociable is really good too. If you don't know that one, check him out too.
So I had made this recommendation a while ago, but for those of you that saw that documentary on Netflix, Chaos, the Manson murders, and the CIA, There's actually a book written by the guy in that, the older gentleman in that. But there's also a podcast that basically goes through that entire book. It's basically an audio book in podcast form. But here's the deal. Here's the catch. That is only available on the Castbox app. It's not on Apple iTunes or Apple Podcast. It's not on Spotify. None of the other podcasts. It's only on Castbox. So if that documentary piqued your interest on those connections between Manson and the CIA and MK Ultra, I highly recommend that you listen to that podcast. It's called Chaos, Manson and the CIA. Again, that's all you have to do is search for that in Castbox and it comes up. Not a recommendation, but did you see where Argentina's president was like, hell, let's just go ahead. If y'all are unsealing the JFK, the MLK files, let's just go ahead and unseal the Hitler files down here. And damn if we wasn't all right, the son of a bitch made it out and had children in Argentina.
No shit. I haven't seen this.
Shit. And the way it was, I've not like gone and found the actual declassified documents yet, which I will. But some synopsis that I have seen state that he got out via Argentinian diplomats in Germany at the time, basically just flew his ass out.
Well, I just looked it up. According to France 24, no declassified CIA documents do not prove that Hitler escaped Argentina.
Yeah, CIA documents don't, but these are Argentinian government documents. The Argentinian president has released their documents.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Yeah. So if you've never watched Hunting Hitler, do so. You'll be convinced within the first season that the son of a bitch got out.
Yeah, he was like, they accused him of being like Father Crispy, something like that. Crispy with a K. Became a monk in Argentina.
Yeah, I don't think he became a monk, but anyway, I think he was down there.
Well, I mean, several did escape. Like Mengele, for sure, escaped. He died of a brain aneurysm while swimming off the coast of Argentina. He definitely made it out.
Yeah, there was a shit ton of them. So, but anyway, there was a series I think called Hunting Evil. It was where they talked about how Mossad tracked down some of them son of bitches and got some of them back. Some of them they just outright killed. But anyway, all right. Well, it is supposed to be record temperatures down here in the old Georgia, upper 80s until Sunday, and then the ass falls out of the weather. But I think this will be our last cold snap, I hope.
Well, I don't care anymore. Just bring it on. Whatever weather you want.
Yeah, just hold your breath. It'll change.
That's right.
All right, Coach, you got anything else?
You know I don't.
Deuces.